Hello friends, welcome to SR Academy.
Welcome to SR Academy. Empowering minds, igniting curiosity. Your gateway to knowledge unleashed. Let's get started.
Today we are going to start Module 2 of Tissue Engineering. So Module 2 is Tissue Architecture. So Tissue Architecture, let's see the syllabus. Have a quick glance at the syllabus of Tissue Architecture, Module 2. Tissue types, and first topic will be tissue types and tissue components. Then we'll be discussing about what are the various components of the tissue, like how we saw the components of the cells like ECM and other stuff, and then different tissue types we will be discussing in this topic. Next topic is tissue repair, how exactly tissue gets repaired, that we'll be discussing, and then followed by engineering wound healing and sequence of events, what are the things which are involved in the wound healing process, the steps involved in, then basic wound healing, so how exactly the basic wound healing takes place. Next, application of growth factors, that we will be discussing, that is it is VEGF or angiogenesis. Then basic properties like cell matrix. Again, cell matrix is the extracellular matrix, that's what I told you. The ECM will be repeated, so you can just write ECM here. Next, cell interactions, telomers and self-renewal, control of cell migrations and tissue engineering. All these topics will be discussed in the tissue architecture module. Let's start with the first topic, that is tissue types and tissue components. Now we know that the different different components which are present in the tissue, that will be tissue components, and different types of cells we saw, so that will give you different types of tissues, right? So let's start, since a lot of this information like cells, tissue, you already know this in biology, biotechnology. Since you are biology students, biotechnology students, I don't think you will need a much introduction about tissue or cells, what are them, all those things. I will just start the topic. The human body consists of 10 organs, and each organ performs its own physiological functions, right? So it has got its own particular physiological functions, every organ in our body. So each organ comprises of n number of cells or number of tissues, like epithelial tissue is there, connective tissue is there, nerve tissue, muscle cells are there, or glandular tissues are there. That means it has got it based on the what cell you are based on the whatever the cells that have been developed, that tissue it will be formed. So now the word tissue is derived from the French meaning that to be. So the tissue components. So tissue components, a tissue is a collection of the cells and extracellular matrix. Obviously the tissue is nothing but made up of what? Cells, extracellular matrix, right? So it's a collection of cells and extracellular matrix which perform function that are intended to. That means, so these tissue consist of cells and extracellular matrix, and which perform a particular task or particular work. Okay, so tissue is made up of what? Cells, definitely. So there are over 200 different types of cells in human body. Now the cell types fall into two main categories, that is epithelial cells and mesenchymal cells. So we will discuss the difference between epithelial and mesenchymal cells. So what are epithelial cells? So they are, if you are talking about in terms of their shape, they are cuboidal in shape, and they are grown as two-dimensional sheets. So epithelial cells, you might have seen, always it will be in 2D, like a layer. So these cells are bipolar and tightly interconnected with neighboring cells, and hence they cannot migrate individually. So whereas the other cells, mesenchymal cells, will be free, so loosely packed. Here it will be tightly packed. The cell and cell come together tightly packed, which are interconnected with the neighboring cells, and hence they cannot migrate individually. A single cell cannot migrate. If it has to migrate, the whole sheet has to migrate. That's why it is called as epithelial cells. So basal side of sheets, that means the above side of the sheet is, basal side, the bottom side of the sheet is connected to the ECM molecules, while the superior side, that is above side, is connected to the vesicle or a tube, where the movement will be there, right? So early embryo consists of mainly epithelial cells, while mesenchymal cells occur as filler. Mesenchymal cells. So mesenchymal cells are loosely connected cells and usually exist alone right? So here, since they are loosely connected, they exist alone, hence they can migrate independently. And one speciality of mesenchymal cell is that if any one mesenchymal cell come into contact with another mesenchymal cell, they will stop differentiating. That means this will help to in order to form a particular structure inside that particular organ, right? So they are bipolar in shape with lamellipodial and lamellipodial extensions. So they are bipolar in shape. So next example is fibroblast cells, so which play a major role in morphogenesis. What do you mean by morphogenesis? To create a particular morphology, okay, or to have a particular shape of a tissue or organ, right? So here, so fibroblast cells which play a major role in the morphogenesis means that in order to get a particular shape of a particular tissue, fibroblasts plays a very important role. That means they can change those particular structures, and also wound healing. So they can grow readily in 2D surfaces, fibroblast cells. So however, their growth is contact inhibited. What do you mean by contact inhibited? That means the fibroblast cells, when they come into contact with another mesenchymal or fibroblast cells, they will stop differentiating. So mesenchymal cells also have the potential to differentiate into more specialized cells, that is highly specialized cells will be there, no? Like for example osteoblasts, chondrocytes, fibroblasts. So table summarizes the difference between the epithelial cells and the mesenchymal cells. So here you can see the left side characteristics and with respect to the two different things, that is epithelia and mesenchyma. So here the first thing is we are having continuous sheets that is present in epithelial cells but not in mesenchymal cells, whereas polar with outer free surface is present in epithelia but not in mesenchyme. So next we are having the bipolar and stellar shape, so that is present in mesenchymal because they are bipolar in nature, whereas epithelia is not. Next, because that is polar with outer free surface. Next, migratory is absence in epithelia because cells they are interconnected and tightly packed. Single cells cannot migrate, whereas mesenchymal cells are loosely packed, so hence they can migrate easily. Next, contact inhibition. That contact inhibition is absent in epithelia and present in mesenchyma. What is contact inhibition? When the mesenchymal cells come into contact with each other, when one mesenchymal cell come into contact with another mesenchymal cells, then it will stop differentiating. Okay, this will help in organizing a particular tissue or structure, right, in the particular organ. So next, that was about contact inhibition, which is present in mesenchymal but not in epithelia. Next, we are having basal surface on ECM, which is present in epithelia, not in mesenchyma. Tissue types, that was about tissue components. Tissue types, the major tissue types include epithelial, connective, nerve, muscle, granular, which perform variety of functions like covering, support, movement, control, and production of projections respectively. So early tissue has its specific characteristics, structure, and function. So epithelial cells will be helpful for covering, whereas connective cells will be helpful for supporting the cells or neighboring cells, neighboring tissues, whereas nerve cells will be helpful for movement, for the communication purpose, whereas muscle cells or muscle tissues will be helpful for controlling, whereas granular will be helpful for the production. So epithelial tissue, the epithelial tissue consists of a sheet of epithelial cells which may be a single layer or multi-layer. So epithelial cells, whatever we discussed, the same thing, we will be getting the tissues, but here the layer will be single or multi-layer. In single layer they are simple, while in multi-layer they are stratified, because in different intercalation will be there, that is stratified. They are very specialized cells to form a lining of all the internal and external body of the surfaces. Now the epithelial tissue is separated from the underlying tissue by a thin sheet of connective tissue or basement membrane. So always know that the epithelial tissue is separated from the underlying tissue, whatever the tissues are there next to adjacent to it, there is a separation. So there is a thin sheet of connective tissue will be there, or a basement membrane will be there, that will separate the underlying tissue with respect to the epithelial tissue. Now the basement membrane provides a structural support for epithelium, because what is the basement membrane? Here it will act as a ECM itself. So that basement membrane will provide the particular epithelial cells as a structural support. So there are different types of epithelial tissue available based on the geometric arrangements. What are those? Based on the geometric arrangements, we are having the squamous epithelia, simple cuboidal epithelia, simple columnar epithelia depending on the geometry, ciliated columnar epithelium. Ciliated in the sense, a lot of ciliations, cilia will be there, or a lot of hair kind of structures or ribbon kind of structures will be there. Then granular epithelium, then stratified epithelium, and pseudo-stratified epithelium. These are some of the types. You can remember 2 or 3. That was about epithelium cells or tissue. Next, connective tissue. Connective tissue has a variety of functions, which includes a mechanical support for bones, ligaments, and storage of body's fluids like fat and blood, and aid in immune responses and tissue repair mechanisms. So here in all the issues we need connective tissue. So connective tissue is simple. You can say that simple example, from bone to the muscle, what is the connection? So that itself is given by the connective tissue. Understanding? Even for the storage of body's fluid like fat and blood, that there also connective tissue requires. So next, aid to the immune response. Whenever the immune system is responding, for that the connective tissue will be helpful. And then tissue repair mechanisms. Also, this connective tissue is mandatory, which will facilitate the tissue repair mechanism. Next, connective tissue originates from the mesoderm of the embryo. That is the where exactly it originates. That is the mesoderm of embryo. Now these includes like cells like fibroblasts, adipocytes, macrophages, plasma cells, and also non-cellular components like collagen 1 and hyaluronic acid. So these are the different the cellular components which is present in the particular tissue, this particular connective tissue. So we are having the fibroblasts, we are having the adipocytes, macrophages. We know what are macrophages and why it is used. I'm not explaining every cells here, or every different cells here. Plasma cells, collagen also, hyaluronic acid also, So like epithelial cells, there are various types of connective tissues. Include loose connective tissue is there. There are 3 different cells. In epithelial cells, based on the geometry, it was columnar, laminar, all those things were there, right? Stratified, pseudo-stratified, and all. Here in this particular connective tissue, we are having 3 types. Loose connective tissue, which is loosely packed. Then we are having the fibrous connective tissue, where a lot of fibers are involved, and specialized connective tissue, where the different part of the body we can see them with which will be different from the loose connective tissue and fibrous connective tissue. That was about connective tissue. Next, moving on to the muscular tissue. In muscular tissue, is simply understood that it's about muscles. So when you are talking about muscles, there are skeletal muscles, there are cardiac muscles, and there are smooth muscles. Definitely, basically you can categorize into 3 types of muscles, right? Skeletal muscles, that obviously consist of striated or chemical energy to physical work, and multinucleated myofibers will be there. Myofibers are nothing but what? Muscle fibers that are responsible for the movement, like maybe for construction, relaxation, even for movement, all those things will be there. So that's where the skeletal muscle come into picture, and that's where the muscular tissue, one of the subtype of the muscular tissue, that is skeletal muscle tissue, plays very important role. So next, cardiac muscles. So in cardiac muscles, what happens? In heart, these particular muscular tissues in heart helps to propel the blood through the body, through the blood vessel. That means in order to create that blood pressure, so it will pump the blood, right? So these tissues are very important. Without this muscular tissue, the heart cannot pump the blood. So cardiac muscles fibers are striated but contain only one nucleus, and they branch and join at junction called as intercalated discs. So smooth muscles, the smooth muscle fibers on the other hand are non-striated and are present in the hollow organs. For example, in like intestine. Okay, for what is the function of the smooth muscles? They will involve in squeezing the substances by alternate contraction and relaxation by doing contraction and relaxations, right? Squeezing is nothing but what, for example, in intestine and all, whatever the food we eat, that should be absorbed. The nutrients in the food should be absorbed and it should be given to the body, right? The energy should be given to the body. So that is what it is doing. That's where we can see these kind of smooth tissues or smooth muscles. There are many areas of the body, many different areas. We will see all these particular tissue types. Some of the examples I'm giving here. So different organization of the muscle tissue is important to perform functions ranging from small magnitude construction in the gut to the fast. Next, coordinated depolarization of the heart muscles. All these functions should be done by this or these muscles tissues are involved in all these functions. Next, we are moving on to the nervous tissue. So nervous tissue, that is for we know that for contact purpose. So nervous tissue for movement purpose also. So nervous tissue is important for the functioning of the nervous system or nervous organs like brain and spinal cord. So brain, obviously it generates electrical pulse, impulse, this everything we know, but without the spinal cord, so whatever the generated signals or electric impulses are there in the brain are useless, because that's why the spinal cord is very important, because spinal cord is the one which will send all the information which is received from the brain to all parts of our body. So now the nerve coordinates the body functions, and the nerve tissue consists of mainly neurons and supporting cells like Schwann cells and astrocytes. So we are having the neurons for communication purpose, for movement purpose we can use, but there are other cells also there which are called as Schwann cells and astrocytes, which will support this particular neurons in order for particular coordination to do the body functions. So neurons are responsible for generating electrical impulses called as action potentials. So where exactly this action potential takes place, how exactly it takes place, I guess you should be knowing, like as biology students. One neuron to another neuron, there should be communication, and where this communication will occur, the one neuron that will be in dendrites, right? So in the synaptic linkage, where one neurons will give its electric impulse to the another neuron. So neurons are responsible for generating electrical impulses called as action potentials. So these electrical impulses are received by the soma, that is called as cell body, or you can say, and are carried along with the axons to the other neurons via dendrites. Now the supporting cells have no role in conducting electrical impulses. That means Schwann cells and astrocytes are not doing any electrical impulse conduction or something like that. They are just supporting, they are creating an environment so that the neuron is stable and the axon is stable, right? However, they play an important role in providing nourishment, insulation and protection. Why? Because when there is an electric signal, then cell has to be nourished, or it should be protected. It should be given a myelin sheath, so which will act as insulation. So that will be done by the Schwann cells and these particular astrocytes. They will give the nourishment, that is, it creates environment and insulation and as well as protection. Next, finally, we are having the granular tissue. So granular tissue is mainly composed of polarized epithelial cells. Again, speaking of epithelial cells, we discussed so far epithelial cells in previous module also. So that produce and secrete the protein products from a precursor present in the microenvironment. So usually the granular tissues are there everywhere. So in that, specifically they are used to produce particular precursors or protein products from particular precursors that is present in microenvironment. That means in that particular microenvironment they are present. Whenever the product is is required, that precursor can be used and the protein can be produced. So that is what the granular tissue does. Now the protein products are usually secreted in the endoplasmic reticulum, that is ER, and packed into the secretory vesicles in Golgi apparatus, and then they are exocytosized into the cytoplasm. This is a copy paste of your PUC textbook, right? So the protein products are usually secreted to in ER, we know that, and they are packed into the secretory vesicles in Golgi complex or apparatus, and then they will be exocytosized. That means they will be released from the cell into the cytoplasm. So classification in the glands, we are having the granular tissues. So glands are classified into exocrine gland and endocrine glands. We know that this is also is from your PUC. So exocrine glands secrete the products either onto the body surfaces like skin or the body cavities like the tissue tube, whereas these glands may be a unicellular or a multicellular, or they can be they are called as ductless glands when you are talking about exocrine. Okay, so examples of exocrine gland we are having the sweat glands of skin and the liver, which secretes the bile, right? For skin we are having the sweat gland, for liver we are having the bile. So on the other hand, endocrine, that was about exocrine, right? So that was ductless. Here endocrine, you can call it as a duct glands because they secrete hormones directly into the bloodstream. They will directly produce protein product or the hormones directly into the bloodstream. Okay, so then these hormones are carried to the target site where exactly they perform their function. Wherever that particular function need to be performed its job, they will do it later. Okay, so that was about the tissue components and the tissue types. And next topic is tissue repair, that we will discuss in the next class.